The ceiling fan made a sound like a dying insect barely stirring the heavy air inside the asteroid outpost's main bar. The walls were scarred with blaster marks, the drinks tasted like expired jet fuel, and the bartender looked like he'd eaten at least one customer this week. Not exactly the kind of place you'd expect to host interspecies diplomacy, but here I was, again trying to convince a pack of paranoid star miners that humanity could be trusted. I swirled the sludge in my glass and glanced around the dim interior. Half the patrons were already armed, the other half were likely halfway to drawing. My bodyguard, a 7-foot-tall warrior from the planet Syrinx, stood beside me, rigid as ever. Her name was Kaylani Devore, and she was equal parts terrifying and mesmerizing scales that shimmered like oil, under neon light's eyes that burned with heat-sensing gold and armor that looked like it had been forged in a volcano. "You are doing that thing again, Specialist Vance," she said without turning her head. "What thing?" I asked, trying to look casual. "That thing where you stare at me like I'm a tactical puzzle you haven't solved." I cleared my throat and took another sip of whatever passed for whiskey on this rock. "I was just admiring your vigilance. Very professional. Totally non-puzzle related." She turned slowly to face me. "Humans lie poorly." "Not a lie," I said, raising both hands. "More of an interpretive truth." Kaylani's nostrils flared. She didn't exactly breathe the way we did, but it was her equivalent of a sigh. "There are 17 potential hostiles in this establishment. I have evaluated every exit route, calculated your survival odds in the event of a skirmish, and determined that the odds would improve if you stopped provoking attention with your face." I blinked. "With my face, it is very expressive." "Thanks, not a compliment." I smiled anyway, still taking it as one. Before she could respond with something cutting and deeply factual, a drink slid down the bar and stopped in front of me. I hadn't ordered it. The bartender pointed toward the far end, where a brutish Torgari male lifted his glass in a silent toast. His tusks gleamed. His eyes didn't blink. Kalani stepped between me and the drink like a wall made of steel and fury. "That one is Draktel, a known syndicate enforcer. He has killed 6 ambassadors in the last 5 cycles." Not exactly the friendliest gesture, then. She didn't answer. She just placed one clawed hand on the plasma dagger at her hip. "Easy," I muttered. Maybe he just liked my expressive face, or wants to wear it. I slowly raised the offered drink, nodded politely, then set it down untouched. Diplomatic message received. Not interested. Kalani's scales shifted slightly, a visual tick I'd learned to interpret as restrained agitation. For a Cyrixie who measured affection in combat bruises and respect in broken bones, she was surprisingly restrained when it came to bar fights. At least so far. I leaned closer, trying to defuse her combat instincts. "You know that armor of yours? It's incredibly, streamlined." Her head turned a fraction toward me. "Streamlined?" "Yeah, aerodynamic, functional, and also incidentally highlights your posterior assets." The silence that followed could have shattered hull glass. Her golden eyes locked onto mine. Her scales flushed a deep bronze Cyrixie embarrassment, if I remember correctly. Then came the slap. I didn't see it coming. One moment I was smirking like an idiot, the next my head had rotated 45 degrees and I was pretty sure I could taste static electricity. I blinked. My jaw ached. My pride whimpered. "Worth it," I muttered. "You are the most tactically incompetent envoy I have ever been assigned to protect." She hissed, her scales still glowing from bronze to rose gold. "You jeopardize this mission with every word you utter. But I'd do it with flair." I grinned. Before she could respond, likely with another slap, the bar door slammed open. 3 figures stepped inside their armor, matte black and unmarked. Their movement was too precise, too coordinated. Kalani froze. "Not locals. You'd think they are bounty-class operators, possibly from the Obsidian Guild." I casually slipped off my stool. "Well, that's a problem." The lead bounty hunter raised a weapon the size of a hoverbike. Specialist Jace Vance, he called, voice modulated into a mechanical growl. "You are in possession of a restricted Cyrixie artifact. Surrender it now." I looked at Kaylani. "I don't have any artifact." She looked at me. "They think you do." "That is enough. Can we explain?" "No." The bounty hunter raised his rifle. Duck, Kalani shouted, flipping the bar table into the air as cover. Blaster fire tore through the space I had just occupied. The bar exploded into chaos, tables overturned, patrons screamed, and the bartender dove under the counter without a second thought. I scrambled behind a support beam while Kalani darted through the smoke like a shadow on fire. Her plasma blade ignited with a howl that made my spine vibrate. One of the hunters fired toward the ceiling, trying to flush us out. Another turned to track Kalani, but he was too slow. She launched herself into a spinning kick that sent his rifle clattering across the floor. I fumbled for my diplomatic-issue sidearm, a gun so underpowered it barely qualified as annoying. Still, I managed to wing one of them in the shoulder, which did exactly nothing except get his attention. Then out of nowhere, the Torgari enforcer who'd sent me the drink appeared behind the last bounty hunter and slammed him into the wall hard enough to leave a dent. "You!" I gasped, ducking behind him for cover. "Enemy of my enemy," he grunted. "You owe me a drink." "Get me out of this alive," I said, "and I'll buy you the whole bottle." Kalani dragged me toward the back exit. "We are moving. Where to? Somewhere without bounty hunters, preferably before I decide to throttle you myself." We dashed into a maintenance corridor, hearts pounding, smoke curling behind us. I looked over at her as we ran, noticing the flush of color still dancing across her scales. "About the compliment," I panted. Later, she snapped. But if we survive, I'll consider letting you explain why comparing a Sirixi respiratory plate to a human butt is not grounds for exile." Fair enough. We didn't stop running for a long time. We didn't slow down until we reached the old cargo tunnels near the outer rim of the asteroid. The place had been abandoned for decades, mostly used now by smugglers and fugitives, too desperate or dumb to care about structural integrity warnings. We were both of those things tonight, maybe just in different proportions. Kalani sealed the blast door behind us and activated the motion dampeners. The hum of the lock system engaged with a soft, satisfying click. "We're clear," she said, pressing her back against the bulkhead. I leaned against the wall, panting. Define clear, because I'm pretty sure half the galaxy just saw me duck behind a bartender with no pants. "Only one bounty team," she replied, scanning the corridor with her heat-sensitive gaze. "More will follow." "Wonderful." She turned to me, eyes narrowing. "Now explain. Why do bounty hunters think you possess a Sirixi artifact?" I threw up my hands. "I have no idea. I'm a low-level envoy sent to negotiate trade rights for Earth's terraforming consortium. My job is literally to shake hands and avoid death." "You are underqualified for both," she muttered. Harsh but fair. I slumped onto a broken crate and pulled out my diplomatic credential chip, flipping it in my fingers. "This is all I've got, unless they've managed to hide something in my socks again." Kalani tilted her head. Again, there was this thing with an insect ambassador and a pheromone-laced cufflink. Long story, bad smell. She exhaled sharply. It might have been a laugh, hard to tell with her physiology. Then she knelt in front of me, scanning my body with her portable field reader. "You're emitting a faint frequency." "Sirixi resonance," I blinked. "I am, yes." "What does that mean? Am I turning into a space lizard? Because I'm not ready for that level of commitment." She ignored me and examined my left shoulder, then reached behind my collar. Her fingers brushed something I hadn't noticed, a small metallic disc embedded in the seam of my shirt. With one precise movement, she yanked it free. The disc pulsed faintly. "Congratulations," she said grimly. "You were tagged like a zoo animal. Worse. That's a Sirixi memory seed. Unauthorized possession is considered high treason by my people." I stared at the tiny object. I swear I didn't even know it was there. Someone must have planted it. Then the question becomes who and why. We both fell silent for a moment, the implication sinking in. "Do you think it has data on it?" I asked cautiously. Kalani nodded. "Encrypted, possibly genetic locked. Only certain individuals could access it." "Well," I said slowly, I could try." She pressed the seat against her wrist port. It took a few seconds, then her eyes widened, pupils dilating into slits. "What is it?" I asked. She didn't answer. Her body went rigid, breath shallow. Then, like a switch had flipped, she yanked the seat away and threw it to the floor. "Okay," I said, backing up slightly. "That reaction doesn't exactly scream harmless trinket." She stood slowly. "That seed contains command-level intel. details of a Sirixi defense protocol, and coordinates for a weapons array buried on a quarantine moon. Information like this could destabilize multiple star sectors. I let out a long breath. And someone thought it'd be fun to sew that into my uniform? Someone wants you hunted, discredited, maybe dead, and they are willing to risk an interspecies incident to do it. I rub my temples. Why do I always attract these people? I just wanted a desk job and a coffee machine that doesn't taste like feet. Kaylani picked up the seat again, now in a containment pouch. If this data reaches Cyrixi High Command through official channels, you'll be labeled a spy. Earth will be seen as complicit. So, I'm screwed. Not necessarily. She stared at the seat, thoughtful. There is someone who might help us. A defector. A Cyrixi war analyst named Alrek Varn. He vanished 5 cycles ago after exposing corruption within the Planetary Weapons Division. Sounds trustworthy. He saved my life once, she said quietly. That was as close to a heartfelt endorsement as I'd ever heard from her. Where is he? Last known coordinates were on Kessa 9, mining colony outer orbit, lawless, dusty, and deeply unpleasant. Fantastic. Let me guess, it smells like wet metal and lost dreams. Very much so. We looked at each other for a beat. Then I sighed. All right. We go to Kessa 9, find this Alrek guy, and try to clear my name before someone nukes a planet over a shirt tag. Acceptable plan, she said, already turning toward the exit hatch. We stepped back into the corridor. I noticed the way she moved, less tense, now more fluid. Maybe it was the clarity of a mission, or maybe somewhere between slaps and shootouts we'd started to trust each other. Just as we reached the exit tunnel, Kaylani stopped abruptly. What is it? I whispered. Her head tilted. Something's wrong. And then, as if summoned by dramatic timing, a deep, static-laced voice echoed through the corridor. Kaylani DeVore, Jace Vance. You are now fugitives of the Orion Accord. Surrender immediately. I turned slowly to see 3 military drones hovering at the tunnel's mouth, weapons locked on us. Behind them stood a humanoid in crimson armor, helmeted, faceless, and very, very tall. Kaylani hissed. That's a Syndic Marshal. Is that bad they don't negotiate? I raised my hand slowly. Hi there. This is all a big misunderstanding. I'd love to talk it out. The Marshal's voice boomed. You have 30 seconds to comply. Kaylani pulled me back. We run. Now. And just like that, we were sprinting again, chased by drones' misunderstandings, and the undeniable realization that somewhere along the way, my life had turned into a galactic thriller with an emotionally repressed alien warrior who slapped like a freight train and now maybe gave a damn whether I lived. The tunnels beneath the asteroid echoed with the mechanical howl of pursuit. Every footfall we made was answered by the whir of drone thrusters and the rhythmic stomp of armored boots. Kalani sprinted ahead of me, fast and lethal, her movements fluid, even in the cramped corridors. I, on the other hand, mostly stumbled and wheezed like a man being chased by tax collectors with plasma rifles. This way she barked, veering hard to the left down a maintenance shaft that looked just barely wide enough for her bulk. I didn't argue. I threw myself in after her, scraping my shoulder on the metal walls, and tried not to scream when something squelched under my boot. How long can we keep this up? I panted. I skipped leg day. For 5 years. Until we're dead, she replied without turning. Wonderful. Thanks for the pep talk. The tunnel opened into a vertical shaft, an old ventilation chute. Kaylani didn't hesitate. She leapt, grabbed a crossbeam, and swung herself up like it was a playground ladder. I stared at the slick, corroded rungs, then at my own diplomatic loafers. Yeah, I muttered, this is fine. No problem at all. I scrambled after her, and by some miracle of adrenaline and sheer terror, I didn't fall to my death. At the top, Kalani yanked me up by the collar just as a plasma bolt sizzled past my foot. Move, she growled, dragging me through a hatch and into what looked like an abandoned security post. She sealed the hatch behind us, then turned, scanning the room. Temporary shelter, she said. They'll have to reroute if they want to follow. I collapsed onto a broken swivel chair and exhaled so hard my lungs filed a complaint. Great, I wheezed. Let's just stay here forever. Build a tiny illegal cottage. Raise lizard chickens. Die old and grumpy. Kaylani gave me a look I'd come to interpret as you're exhausting but amusing, so I won't disembowel you yet. This delay confirms it, she said. You've been marked. By the Orion Accord. She nodded, or at least someone with access to their systems. The warrant was authentic. That means someone high up believes or wants others to believe that you're a traitor in possession of restricted Sirixi tech. But we have the real proof now, I said, pulling the containment pouch from my pocket. The memory seed. She didn't look as hopeful. That only matters if we make it off this rock. A silence settled over us. One of those heavy, suffocating ones that pressed in between beats of a shared heartbeat neither of us wanted to acknowledge. Then Kaylani knelt beside the access terminal, fingers moving across the cracked interface. What are you doing? I asked. Calling in a ride. I leaned forward. You have friends, acquaintances, contacts, people who owe me for not vaporizing them. Well, that's one way to build a network. She tapped a final command and the panel buzzed to life, sending out a short encrypted signal. Then she sat back and looked at me. Extraction shuttle, 10 minutes. Docking ring D. I nodded. And then we go to Kessa 9. Yes. Find Alrek Varn. Yes. Clear my name. She hesitated. Hopefully. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees. You know, for someone whose idea of small talk is listing fatal injuries in alphabetical order, you're being unusually helpful. I don't enjoy wrongful executions, she said flatly. That's not it. She didn't respond, but her scales shimmered ever so slightly, just a faint touch of copper along her jawline. That was new. I'm growing on you, aren't I said, grinning. I am growing concerned about your capacity for survival, she corrected. Uh-huh. You slapped me. You saved my life. You scanned me for unauthorized tech. That's basically Sirixi foreplay, right? She turned away, but not before I caught the faintest ripple of color that might have been rose gold. Then the building shook. An explosion rocked the corridor outside, sending dust and old ceiling panels raining down on us. Kalani was on her feet, instantly, weapon drawn. They're coming, she said. How, I asked, standing up with all the speed of a stunned turtle. They must have tracked the signal. I didn't encrypt it well enough. Well, let's file that under things to feel guilty about later and move. She grabbed my hand, firm, hot, and surprisingly gentle, and hauled me toward the secondary exit. Docking ring D, she said. We have to reach it before they cut us off. We barreled through a side door, down another hallway, and into a maintenance lift that wheezed in protest as we ascended. Every second felt like it might end with plasma fire or collapsing steel, but somehow we made it to the top. Docking ring D was lit only by a few flickering overheads. A sleek black and red shuttle hovered above the landing pad, engines running, boarding ramp lowered. It looked like a predator waiting to strike. Kaylani didn't slow. Is that the ride? I asked. It's the Ghost Widow, piloted by a smuggler named Nyx. That name sounds comforting. She's reliable. Mostly. We sprinted up the ramp just as another blast echoed down the corridor behind us. Kalani slammed the hatch shut, and a second later the shuttle roared to life and bolted from the dock like a bat out of a plasma storm. Inside, a figure lounged in the pilot's chair, small, humanoid, and with hair that shimmered like ice under neon. You're lucky I like you, Kale, she called over her shoulder. I've got 3 warrants of my own, and now I'm flying fugitives off an Accord flag station. You better have something worth my trouble. Kalani sat beside her, calm as always. He's got a memory seed, Sirixi origin, and a target painted on his soul. Nyx turned to me, one eyebrow raised. You seriously? What are you, a glorified notary diplomatic liaison? I said, holding up my credential chip like it meant something. She snorted. You people have the shortest lifespans in the galaxy. Kaylani reached across and handed her the sealed seed. We need to get to Kessa 9. Of course you do. Nyx slid the controls forward. Buckle in, Buttercup. It's going to be a bumpy ride. As the stars stretched into streaks around us and the engines purred with hyperspace energy, I finally let out the breath I'd been holding since the bar fight. Kalani was watching me again, her posture relaxed, eyes thoughtful. What? I asked. You are unpredictable, inefficient, and prone to recklessness. I get that a lot, but not entirely useless. I grinned. That's the nicest thing you've ever said to me. I'm still considering killing you. That's the second nicest. She shook her head slightly, but I swore I saw a faint flicker of lavender ripple across her throat, a color I hadn't seen before. I filed that away for later. Kessa 9 made me miss the asteroid bar, and that place had drinks that tasted like battery acid. From orbit, the planet looked like a dried-out bloodstain smudged across the void. On the surface, it was worse red dirt metal ruins and heat waves that made the air shimmer like it was trying to escape. The Ghost Widow touched down on a broken tarmac surrounded by collapsed mining rigs and scavenged transport hulls. The smell was a pungent cocktail of rust-ion exhaust and something vaguely sulfurous. Nix had to cycle the filters twice just to keep the cockpit breathable. "This place is a dump," I muttered, peering out the viewport. "Accurate," Kailani replied, already checking her gear. "The Syndic won't follow us here. Kessa 9's under no jurisdiction, and Nix's transponder masks our heat trail. That's comforting. Comfort is not the priority. Survival is." "You say that like they're mutually exclusive." "They are. For you." Nix let out a low whistle from the controls. "Charming as ever, Kael. You owe me for this trip big time. No credits. Something useful. Something explosive." "We'll see what Alrek Varn gives us," Kailani said. I raised an eyebrow. "Are we sure he's even alive?" "No, but he has a reputation for surviving impossible things. He's Sirixi. Of course he is." We disembarked, boots crunching against baked dust and fractured alloy. The only signs of life came from the ramshackle settlement in the valley below, a collection of mismatched prefab modules, satellite dishes, and towering scrap piles. Kailani led the way, her every movement smooth and coiled. I tried to match her stride, which made me look like I was jogging beside a silent tank. "Stay close," she said. "Kessa 9 doesn't ask questions. It just eats people." "That's comforting," I muttered again. The locals weren't what you'd call friendly. Most were grizzled multi-species scavengers who looked like they'd kill you for blinking too loud. I got more than a few looks, most of them sizing up the resale value of my boots. Kalani didn't bother looking at anyone. She moved like a predator, her presence enough to make most of them step aside. Occasionally, someone would glance at her markings and instantly lose interest in picking a fight. "The seventh flame," someone whispered as we passed. I nudged her. "People know you." My cast was not subtle. "Let me guess, war crimes or karaoke champion." She ignored me, but her jaw tightened. At the edge of the settlement stood a squat building covered in soot and neon fungus. A cracked sign above the door read, "YEVs." Below that, in smaller script, "Drinks, repairs, secrets." Three things I very much needed. Inside the bar was dim and crowded with beings in various stages of intoxication and disrepair. Kailani strode to the counter and slammed a silver hex token on the surface. "Tell Alrek his debt just matured." The bartender, a spindly insectoid with one eye and three arms, clicked thoughtfully, then buzzed toward a back door. A few tense moments passed. I shifted uncomfortably while a Lorakian tried to arm wrestle a droid beside me. Finally, the door opened and a voice, deep, rough, and unmistakably Sirixi, spoke. Well, Kailani Devor. I was wondering how long until you crawled out of the black." A male Sirixi emerged, older than Kailani, with burn-scarred scales and one cybernetic eye. He wore a cloak that looked like it had been woven from ship insulation and regret. But there was power in his presence even in this hole. "Alrek Varn," Kailani said. He studied her, then me. "And you've brought a human. Bold." I stood. "Jace Vance, diplomatic disaster at your service." He barked a laugh and gestured for us to follow. His office, if you could call it that, was a metal bunker filled with screens, cracked data cores, and enough explosive residue to terrify a military audit team. He motioned to the bench across from him, and Kalani sat with the kind of tension that suggested this reunion wasn't entirely friendly. "I need a decrypt," she said, placing the seat on the table. Ulrich's cybernetic eyes zoomed in, scanning. "Old tech. Pre-split protocols. This kind of data shouldn't exist anymore." "It does," I said. "And it's got bounty hunters, the Accord, and probably my mom chasing us across the stars." He grunted. "You're the one who had it sewn into his clothes, aren't you?" "Against my will, for the record." Ulrich turned to Kailani. "Why are you helping this one?" Her eyes didn't leave his. "Because someone's trying to start a war, and they're using him to do it." That sobered him. He took the seed and slipped it into a cracked decryptor interface that sparked whirringly when it powered on. Data began to stream across the hollow in harsh red glyphs. Kaylani leaned in. So did I. As Alrek scrolled through the files, his face darkened. This isn't just military, he said. This is planetary defense override, satellite control, drone swarm protocols, and targeting data for a HFY orbital cannon network. Wait, I said. Why would someone plant this on me? Alrek tapped one file. Look, it was a communications log, a list of names, one of them familiar. Ambassador Ralos, I said in disbelief. He's head of Earth Council envoy. He's the reason I got this assignment. Kaylani's jaw tightened. He's compromised, Alrek continued. According to this, the hegemony has been bribing or coercing officials on both sides. The goal, sabotage a peace alliance between Earth and Syrinx. Make it look like one side is plotting to destroy the other. That explains the bounty, I muttered. They wanted me dead before anyone could figure this out. Kaylani turned to Alrek. Can this data be traced? Proven only if we transmit it through a secure nexus, a diplomatic relay beacon. There's one on Delvar Station. That's deep in neutral territory, I said. Dozens of factions monitor it. Exactly, Kaylani replied. Which means if we broadcast from there, no one can suppress it. Alrek stood pulling the seat from the decryptor. You'll never make it on foot, but I've got a transport. Fast. Dirty. Stolen 3 times. I love him already, I said. He handed the seed to Kaylani. Their fingers brushed just for a second, and something unspoken passed between them. Respect. Regret. Maybe more. I hope you're right about this human, Alrek said. She glanced at me, her eyes unreadable. So do I. We left before nightfall using Alrek's transport to lift off from Kessa 9 under the cover of a solar flare. As the ship pierced the dusty atmosphere, I settled into the seat beside Kaylani, who stared silently out at the stars. You okay? I asked. Her reply was soft. Alrek Varn was once my commanding officer, and more. Oh, it was a long time ago. I nodded. Do you still care about him? I care about what he stood for, she said. But he's a ghost now, like so many of our kind. Her hand brushed mine on the console, barely a touch, but deliberate. You are not a ghost, she added quietly. Not yet. The stars stretched around us again, and I didn't know whether the chill running down my spine was fear or the realization that I was falling for someone who could kill me in 6 ways I didn't understand and might just die to save me. Delvar Station hung in space like a bloated chandelier of bad ideas and worse architecture. Suspended between 2 neutral zones and technically owned by no one, it was the kind of place where you could get married, assassinated, and arrested in the same hour, sometimes by the same person. Welcome to paradise, I muttered as Alrek's stolen transport eased into the approach lane. The station's hull was covered in graffiti-welded patches and neon signs advertising everything from biosurgery to emotionally safe cuddling pods. Kaylani adjusted the angle of our trajectory, her eyes fixed on the distant docking bay. We must assume we've already been spotted. Oh, no doubt. I bet there's a bounty pop-up ad running on the public feed right now. We keep the seed hidden, she said. We find the relay beacon. We broadcast. Then we run. Simple plan. I'm sure it'll go smoothly. No surprises at all. I do not appreciate sarcasm. That's fair. I use it to hide my constant terror. Nix's voice crackled through the comms. You've got 12 hours until the station's AI resets its security logs. After that, anyone watching can trace your access. So do your thing and get off my ship before I have to delete another identity. Appreciate the support, I said. Truly heartwarming. We docked without incident, though I didn't trust the lack of laser fire. It was too quiet, like the universe was inhaling before throwing something sharp. The airlock hissed open and Delvar's chaos greeted us like a punch to the senses, blaring music, shouting vendors, and the omnipresent smell of fried engine grease and disappointment. Kaylani moved ahead in full stealth mode, hood-drawn gait, smooth but predatory. I stayed behind her trying to look like a clueless tourist, which, to be fair, wasn't far from the truth. The diplomatic relay was buried in the administrative core of the station, a fortified data spine protected by half-hearted security and overworked bureaucrats. Our plan hinged on Kaylani's stolen access codes and my still valid diplomatic ID. We just had to not die before we got there. We were halfway through the commerce quadrant, dodging a fight between two jelly-bodied gamblers when someone stepped into our path. Vance said a too familiar voice. I froze. Thomas Ralos, Earth's top ambassador and my former boss, stood with a pair of armored guards flanking him. His smile was all charm and poison. I've been looking for you. Kalani stepped in front of me before I could speak. Her tone was pure steel. You are compromised. Ralos raised an eyebrow. That's a strong accusation from a Cyrixi exile traveling with a wanted human. Oh, good, I said, peeking around her shoulder. We're still running with the traitor narrative. Super creative. You're holding stolen tech, he said smoothly. Dangerous tech. If you surrender it now, we can make all this disappear. Funny, I said. You mean like how my career disappeared? My clean record? My ability to order a sandwich without triggering a red alert? You don't understand what you're involved in, he said, tone icy now. This alliance between Earth and Cyrix, it's a dream, but dreams cost blood. Some things are too dangerous to share, and some lies are too dangerous to keep Kaylani shot back. People were beginning to watch. Raylos noticed eyes twitching. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. Jace, listen to reason. Give me the seed. You walk away. I stared at him. The man who'd once mentored me. The man who had handed me this assignment with a proud smile and a pat on the shoulder. I can't, I said. Not this time. Then you leave me no choice. Kalani moved fast. Her knee slammed into the nearest guard's chest plate before he even reached for his weapon. I ducked the second swing and slammed my fist into his visor. It hurt like hell, but it worked. We ran, past shouting vendors, through alleys of neon and shadow diving between food stalls and cyberware clinics. Kaylani guided us like a living map, her breath, even her eyes, scanning for threats. I just tried not to puke or fall behind. We reached the outer perimeter of the relay complex in 5 minutes flat. It was a narrow tower embedded in the station's spine, guarded by biometric locks, and two sluggish station employees who looked like they hadn't slept since the last galactic census. Let me handle this, I said, stepping forward. I drew out my diplomatic ID and flashed my best smile. Jace Vance, Earth Envoy. Emergency access request under Clause 72C of Interspecies Preservation Statutes. The receptionist blinked. That clause doesn't exist. It does now. He hesitated. Kaylani stepped up beside me and let her hood fall. The receptionist went pale. You're Cyrixi, yes, she said, and very, very armed. He buzzed us through. Inside the relay chamber hummed with energy. Massive data conduits spiraled around us, glowing with pulses of blue light. The console sat in the center like a throne of ancient tech. I approached the input panel. My hands were shaking. Kalani placed hers over mine, steady and warm. You can do this. I nodded, inserted the memory seed. The system flared to life. Data streamed across the air, schematics, intercepted messages, transfer logs, war plans, everything. Then a warning blinked. Trace detected. Someone's trying to stop the upload, I said. Kaylani pulled her plasma blade and turned toward the door. Then we hold them off. Footsteps echoed down the corridor. Shouts, weapons charging. I just need another 30 seconds. Take 15. She stood between me and the entrance like a living bulwark blade, humming scales shifting to that deep sapphire I now knew meant focus. The first attackers came fast, mercenaries in accord armor, probably hired by Ralos or worse. Kaylani met them with brutal grace, each movement efficient and deadly. She fought like a storm contained inside a single body. I focused on the console, hands flying across controls, willing the signal to stabilize. A bar crawled across the display, 20%, 50, 80. A plasma bolt seared past me. I turned to see Kaylani stagger, her shoulders scorched. She didn't stop. Almost there, I shouted. Another guard rushed her. She sidestepped, slamming him into the wall. 95, 99. Upload complete. The data burst through the relay, secured in a multi-channel diplomatic cast wide enough to hit every major delegation across 5 sectors. It was out. The truth was out. The room fell silent. The attackers hesitated, then fled. They knew it was over. Kaylani leaned against the wall, breathing hard. Her scales flickered with exhaustion and pain. You okay? I asked, rushing to her side. She looked at me, eyes fierce despite the wound. We did it. Yes, I said, helping her to her feet. We just started a diplomatic incident the size of a moon, but yeah, we did it. Her hand found mine again, fingers tightening. I've fought for many causes, she said softly. Most of them turned to ash. But this might change something. I nodded. It already has. We slipped out of the relay tower before the Accord's official response units arrived. Delvar Station buzzed with confusion and breaking news. The truth was out there. The seed had done its job. But we weren't safe yet. As we reached the docking bay, Nyx was already waiting, ship engines hot. Took your time, she called. Had to save the galaxy, I said. Ugh, I hate when you do that. We boarded in silence. Kailani sat beside me as we lifted off. I reached for her hand again, and this time she didn't pull away. The stars outside the viewport streamed like silver rain as Nyx guided the Ghost Widow away from Delvar Station at max burn. Inside the ship, silence settled like dust, thick, uneasy, and waiting to be stirred by the next explosion or betrayal. Kailani sat across from me in the med bay, her shoulder wrapped in an autoseal brace. The burn looked nasty, but the field gel was already working. Still, her jaw clenched tight, her posture tense. I'm fine, she said before I could ask. Again. You say that every time you're bleeding, I replied. One of these days I'm going to call your bluff. You won't live long enough to try. Was that a threat, a warning? And a compliment? I gave her a tired grin, the adrenaline slowly draining from my system. My fingers still tingled from the relay console. We'd done it. The encryption seed was out. The data had reached every major diplomatic channel across the sector. Within hours, entire governments would know the truth. The hegemony was manipulating both Earth and Syrinx into conflict, and Ambassador Ralos was at the heart of it. We should celebrate, I said, gesturing toward a ration bar I'd found in Nyx's cabinet. I've got half a chocolate protein cube and something that might be a dehydrated apple. Kailani didn't smile, but her eyes softened. There will be no celebration yet, she said. The hegemony will not retreat just because we've exposed them. They will accelerate their plans. I know, I admitted, but for once we're not behind. She leaned back against the wall, wincing slightly as her shoulder touched the panel. That may change quickly. You've made yourself a symbol now. They'll want you gone. Yeah, I said, but now I've got the most dangerous bodyguard in the sector. She looked away, silent for a moment. Her scales shimmered in quiet motion, lavender and gray, swirling in complex patterns I couldn't interpret. What does that color mean? I asked gently. She hesitated, then spoke low. Conflicted, protective. My voice dropped with hers. And the lavender awareness of another's presence, of their effect on you. I sat forward slightly. So, I affect you. She didn't move. You've made choices that I did not expect. You have proven more capable, loyal, unreasonably persistent. I chuckled. That last one's practically a family trait. She finally turned to me, eyes catching mine in the low cabin light. You risked your life for truth, for my people, for me. I stood across the narrow space between us and reached for her hand. She didn't stop me. I didn't know what I was doing when I walked into that bar, I said. Didn't know I'd end up carrying a memory seed or jumping across half the galaxy with a warrior who could punch a hole through a bulkhead. But I know this, if I had to do it again, I'd still say something inappropriate just to meet you. Her eyes closed slowly and her fingers tightened around mine. You are still foolish, absolutely, and still inefficient, terribly. But she leaned closer, voice soft as hydrogen mist. You have earned my respect, my trust. My heart thudded, and your slap still hurts. A smile touched her lips, barely visible but real. That was for diplomacy. This is personal. Her hand slid to the back of my neck, drawing me close. Our foreheads touched, her species sign of intimate trust, and the moment stretched quiet and sacred, broken only by the voice of the universe beyond. Then Nyx ruined it. Okay, lovebirds, her voice crackled over the intercom. Hate to interrupt the interspecies, tension or whatever, but we've got an incoming hail. Priority channel, Federation Council seal. Kalani straightened instantly, all warrior again. I sighed and pulled away, already missing the closeness. We moved to the cockpit. Nyx rotated her chair lazily, one foot on the console. Somebody important wants to talk to you, she said, flicking the screen. The hologram burst to life, Ambassador Heron, a Federation diplomat with the kind of mustache that made you distrust all government-issued facial hair. His expression was grim. Specialist Vance. Commander DeVore. Not Commander anymore, Kaylani corrected. After this transmission that may change, he said, the data you uploaded has thrown the entire sector into upheaval. Earth's Envoy Council has issued a formal investigation into Ambassador Relos. HFY High Command has initiated emergency talks with the Federation. Kaylani's eyes narrowed, and the hegemony Heron's gaze darkened. They've denied everything, of course, but intelligence indicates their fleet has mobilized. Their forward carriers are now within range of the Signaris Gate. Too close to both our worlds, I muttered. What's their angle? They intend to deploy the bioweapon detailed in the encryption seed. I felt the air leave the room. You're sure completely. The signatures match. You've exposed them, but now they'll act fast. They're counting on Earth and Cyrix hesitating, doubting each other long enough to make a preemptive strike impossible. Kaylani's jaw clenched. They underestimate us. That's why I'm contacting you, Heron said. You've become a rallying point. You and Kaylani, the symbol of what an alliance could be. I blinked. Wait, are you saying... We want you to lead a joint operation, a Cyrixi human strike team, small fast. Your mission board the hegemony's command carrier and disable the bioweapon before it can be launched. Kaylani's voice was like cold steel. That ship will be heavily defended, we know, Heron said. But you two have a tendency to survive the impossible. He looked at us one last time. You have 12 hours before the fleet reaches deployment range. We'll send coordinates. Choose your team. Good luck. The hologram faded. Nix let out a low whistle. You guys really do like making enemies. Kaylani turned to me. You don't have to do this. I know. It's likely suicide. Yeah, you're not trained for this. I looked her straight in the eye. Neither was I trained to fall for you. That didn't stop me either. She didn't reply, but her hand found mine again, tight, strong, and fiercely warm. We had 12 hours. Then it was us against the most dangerous ship in the galaxy, and somehow, impossibly, I was ready. 12 hours doesn't feel like a lot when you're planning a suicide mission, especially not from the cramped planning bay of a stolen stealth ship surrounded by people who could technically still turn you in for a bounty, though I'd like to think we'd grown on them. Kaylani stood at the central holotable projecting the layout of the hegemony command carrier, Vrexel Dominion. The thing was less a ship and more a mobile continent built for war. Layered defenses, active AI countermeasures, squadrons of autonomous drones, and a planetary-scale bioweapon buried deep inside its armored core. This is madness, I said for about the 15th time. Even if we get in, how do we even find the device? Kaylani didn't look away from the display. According to Alrec's decryption, the weapon's core must remain cooled. That gives us a target thermal regulation hubs near the reactor spine. And once we find it, I asked, we disable it or destroy it. I blinked. Destroying it sounds big. It would detonate with a shock wave measurable from planetary orbit, she admitted. Right. That's comforting. Nix leaned against the bulkhead, arms folded. So the plan is sneak into a death fortress, poke around until something goes boom and escape before we're atomized. I pointed at her. See, when she says it, it sounds insane. Kaylani glanced at us both. There is no other way. If the weapon deploys, Earth and Cyrix are both gone. Nix blew out a breath. You two are lucky I like chaos. I'll fly the Widow and close deploy you with a cloaked drop pod and stay in orbit as long as I can without being turned into space confetti. Space confetti, I repeated. Also comforting. Kaylani placed a hand on the table. I will lead the infiltration. Jace, you'll stay close to me. We split only if forced. Do not try to be heroic. I raised a brow. But what if I feel heroic? Her eyes narrowed. Then I will personally remove your kneecaps. Love it when you talk sweet to me. We spent the next few hours in prep Kaylani, inspecting her plasma blades with meditative focus, me, checking and rechecking the single sidearm Nix had reluctantly lent me something between a holdout blaster and a glorified flashlight. At one point, I found Kaylani alone in the storage bay adjusting the seal plates on her armor. I hesitated, then stepped in. Hey, got a second? She didn't look up. Always. I moved closer. Before we possibly get vaporized, there's something I want to ask. She paused. Speak. When this is over, if we survive what happens, then her hands stilled. In Sirixi tradition, she said slowly, bonding during battle creates a link, a shared fate. Yeah, but what if I want more than just fate? She finally met my gaze. You want choice. I want you. Not because war threw us together, because we chose each other. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she stepped close, her voice low. Then after this battle, if we live, I will show you what choosing means. My heart might have stopped. But then the alert tone blared through the ship, and the universe decided feelings could wait. We were approaching the Vrexel Dominion. The drop pod was tiny, cramped, and terrifying. Kalani strapped me in across from her, her armor gleaming under the emergency lights. You remember the plan, she asked. Get in. Don't die. Don't be heroic. Stick close to the murder goddess with the nice eyes. Her brow arched. You added that last part. Emotional support, I said. For me, the pod launched with the subtle grace of a thunderclap and a punch to the chest. We streaked toward the hegemony ship, cloaked by Nyx's masking field, threading between sensor arrays and active defense turrets. One stray signal, one misplaced blip, and we'd be ash. But somehow, it worked. We impacted a maintenance bay with a bone-rattling crunch, the stealth shielding, frying the system just long enough to keep us off grid. Kalani pried open the hatch and pulled me through. The interior of the Dominion was a nightmare of black steel and humming conduits. The air vibrated with power and menace. Everything felt alive and angry. Stay close, she whispered. We moved through shadowed corridors, ducking between power nodes and data towers, avoiding patrol drones by inches. Kalani moved like she belonged here, silent, deadly sure. I followed like a slightly confused ghost with a blaster. When we reached the cooling sector, Kalani froze. There, she said, pointing to a vast chamber below. Hundreds of coolant tubes pulsed with energy, all feeding into a central core. That's it, I asked. That's the superweapon. No, she replied. That's its heart. She tapped a console, beginning a data transfer. We'll overload the system, gradually shut down the coolant so it melts from the inside. The core will auto-vent to avoid overload, triggering a lockout. They won't be able to deploy it. I nodded. How long? 7 minutes. Plenty of time, I said just before the alarm went off. Kalani whipped around, weapons drawn. They found us. We ducked behind the console just as the doors blew open, and hegemony enforcers swarmed in armor, plated with shimmering fields and weapons glowing with cruel intent. Kalani moved like a blur, blades flashing. I fired wildly badly, but with enthusiasm covering her flank as we fought to protect the console. 3 minutes, she shouted over the noise. Another wave entered. I ducked behind a coolant line, nearly losing my grip on the blaster. A shockwave knocked me sideways and I slammed into the wall. Pain flared. Blood trickled. Kalani was everywhere, slashing, blocking, pushing forward. But even she was slowing, bleeding, tiring. Then something moved behind her. A final enforcer blade drawn, closing in. I didn't think. I moved. I threw myself between them, raising my arms. The impact sent fire down my side, and I felt something tear. Kalani roared an actual roar, primal and shaking, and finished the enforcer with a spinning strike that sent the enemy crashing into the console itself. The cooling lines ruptured. The core lit up in a swirl of white-blue heat. Kalani grabbed me as alarm screamed. It's done, she said. We need to move. I might have broken something, I groaned. Only one. She pulled me up, her arm under mine, dragging me toward the emergency evac port. Hold on. Behind us, the weapon core began to melt, energy pulsing in erratic, dangerous waves. Nyx's voice came through the comm, crackling. I've got you on sensors, barely. You've got 60 seconds before that thing vents and fries half the quadrant. We're moving, Kalani snapped. We reached the airlock, sealed it behind us, and launched the emergency pod. As we blasted away from the Dominion, the core behind us exploded, not in a violent burst, but in a silent, brilliant implosion of light. The weapon was gone. We tumbled through space, shaken but alive. Inside the pod, Kalani cradled me gently, her scales lit with lavender and violet and streaks of silver I'd never seen before. You're hurt, she said. I smiled weakly. Just a scratch. Maybe a puncture. Definitely some internal screaming. She leaned her forehead against mine. I choose you, she whispered. Then everything went dark. I woke up to a soft humming, a faint antiseptic scent, and the gentle pressure of a warm hand wrapped around mine. At first I thought I was dead, but death, as it turned out, had excellent lighting and a surprisingly comfy pillow. Jace Kaylani's voice came through low and unmistakably real. You're awake. I blinked against the glow panels above me. The ceiling wasn't familiar, nor was the quiet too quiet for a battlefield too clean for Nyx's ship. I turned my head, wincing slightly, and saw her sitting beside me, still armored, one arm, bandaged but posture perfectly alert. I was starting to think you wouldn't come back, she said. I tried to smile. You're not that lucky. She leaned back, slightly relieved, softening her sharp features. Her hand didn't let go. Where are we? I asked, throat dry. A Federation medical ship, she said. They picked up our pod on the outer edge of the Signaris belt just after the Dominion's weapon core destabilized. We survived, I said. You did, she corrected. Barely. I glanced at my side, wrapped in synth flesh and healing foam. The memory of that final blow, the lunge, the pain, her roar came rushing back. You saved me. She looked at me with a hint of exasperation. We saved each other. Outside the window, I saw ships, dozens of them, human and Sirixi alike, stationed in formation. Military vessels, relief cruisers, delegation transports, an entire armada in motion. The weapon's gone, I said. The data's out. What now? Now Kaylani said we negotiate peace. She stood and crossed the room to retrieve something from the cabinet. When she returned, she held a small black band etched with both Sirixi and human script symbols of unity, protection, and bond. This was delivered by War Marshal Virex, she said. He has officially recognized your actions. And your connection to me. I raised an eyebrow. So this is like a medal. It's more than that. Among my people, it's a declaration that your safety is my duty, that my path and yours are now entwined, in battle, in purpose. She paused. In life. I swallowed hard. So this is real. It is binding, involuntary, and very real. I took the band, turning it over in my hands. What happens if I put it on? She looked me in the eyes, voice low. Then you are mine, and I am yours. I didn't hesitate. I slid it over my wrist. Her scales flushed instantly with a rush of violet so deep it looked like starlight on water. I stood up, still sore but alive and fully aware of the moment between us. So what do we do now? I asked, stepping closer. Now we attend the summit, she said, as envoys of the new alliance. Wait, we're the envoys. She nodded. You are the first human formally bonded to a Sirixi warrior. They want your face everywhere. Oh, great, I muttered. Guess I should work on my bowing. You should also prepare to be challenged. Our bond is controversial. There are factions on both sides who will try to undo what we've started. Let them try, I said. I've got the deadliest woman in the galaxy on my side. She gave me a rare, genuine smile. And you're not bad with that tiny blaster of yours. I puffed up a little. You mean my glorified flashlight of justice? She leaned in, pressed her forehead to mine again. In Sirixi culture, she murmured, we mark new beginnings, not with words, but with action. My heart skipped. What kind of action? She kissed me. Slow, intentional. Fire and stardust, every bit of tension between us melting into something tender, something earned. When she pulled back, her eyes shimmered. Now she said, turning toward the door, let's go change the galaxy. So the Peace Summit was unlike anything I'd ever seen. Held aboard a neutral star citadel in orbit above a former war zone, it brought together every power in the Sector Earth's delegation, Sirixi High Command Federation observers, even neutral species who'd previously kept their distance. And at the center of it all, us. Ambassador Heron introduced us personally. Jace Vance, formerly of Earth's Diplomatic Corps. Kalani DeVore, Sirixi Warrior of the Seventh Flame, the two individuals responsible for exposing the hegemony conspiracy and for halting the weapon that would have eradicated two civilizations. The chamber rippled with murmurs. Kalani stood tall beside me, unflinching, in the face of hundreds of scrutinizing eyes. I held her hand openly. No hiding, no apologies. We spoke together, not as soldiers, not as spies, as survivors, as proof that cooperation wasn't just possible, it was powerful. We told them what we'd seen, what we'd done, what we almost lost, and what we found together. There were protests, objections, traditions challenged, protocols questioned, but there was also silence, and then applause. The first motion of joint cooperation passed by a narrow margin, but it passed. Human and Cyrixy forces began working together to hunt down the last of the hegemony's sleeper cells. A new coalition was born, fragile, precious, and we were its symbol. Weeks later, Kaylani and I stood at the edge of a quiet cliff on Narion 3, a world known for peace and gravity-defying waterfalls. She wore ceremonial armor, slim, elegant, not designed for war. I wore something that made me feel like a slightly awkward space prince, but she liked it, said I looked acceptable. We exchanged vows again, this time not under fire, not on a crumbling space station, but beneath 3 suns and a sky full of promise. At the reception, Nyx drank an entire bottle of synth champagne, gave a slurred toast about how she taught Kaylani everything she knows about sarcasm, and tried to kiss a flower arrangement. It was perfect. As the evening faded and we walked alone under the twin moons, Kaylani stopped and turned to me. "Do you remember what you said in the bar the day we met?" I groaned. "Please don't bring that up again. You complimented my posterior, inappropriately, loudly, and got slapped into another dimension." "Yes," and now I grinned. "Now I still think it's impressive, and I stand by every word." She stepped close, her arm sliding around my waist. "Good, because you're going to spend the rest of your life defending that statement." And I did, with every breath, with every choice, with her.